You are on HOA clapback. The board made it official. I tapped my key fob against the elevator reader and watched the screen flash red. Denied. Diane Mercer stepped out from behind the concierge desk, her coral blazer catching the lobby light, and said, "You need to follow procedure. Your floor access has been suspended pending a hearing for unauthorized contractor activity." She held up a stack of color-printed timestamps with highlights, her blonde shoulder-length hair swinging as she moved closer. "I just got back from a business trip," I said. "What contractor?" "What are you talking about?" She smiled, thin and tight. "The logs will not help you. Your guest list privileges are also revoked at the package room. You have 72 hours to respond to the hearing notice, or the case becomes final." I moved to Atlanta 3 years ago for a finance job at a mid-size firm downtown. I needed proximity to the office and something with decent amenities, so I bought a one-bedroom unit at Aurora Heights Condominium COA, a mixed-use high-rise with retail at street level and 30 floors of condos above. The board was known for being strict, but most residents were professionals who kept their heads down. I did the same. Paid my fees on time, never caused trouble, never had a single violation. My job required long hours and occasional travel, so the last thing I needed was constant building drama, threatening my ability to focus on work. But standing there in the lobby that Wednesday evening, watching Diane's smug expression, I realized the drama had found me anyway. The hearing notice had been slipped under my door while I was gone. I pulled it out of my bag and scanned it. The front desk supervisor had signed it. The claim was vague: unauthorized contractor in the building, guest list suspended, package room access revoked. No details, no date, no witness. I looked up at Diane. "What contractor? When did this supposedly happen?" She crossed her arms, the stack of timestamps still in one hand. "You need to follow procedure. Submit your response in writing within 72 hours. If you fail to comply, the board will proceed with sanctions." I felt my pulse kick up. Sanctions? For what? I have not had anyone in my unit in 2 weeks. I have been out of town. She turned toward the concierge desk. "The logs will not help you. Your access will remain suspended until the hearing concludes." I stepped past her and walked to the concierge desk. The front desk supervisor, a young guy named Marcus, looked uncomfortable. He would not meet my eyes. I leaned on the counter. "Marcus, what is this about? Who reported a contractor?" He glanced at Diane, then back at me. "I just follow the notices, man. The board sends them down. I post them. I do not have details." I pulled out my phone and opened the building portal app. My guest list screen showed a red banner: privileges suspended. The package room tab was grayed out. I scrolled to the elevator access section and found a new entry dated 2 days ago, while I was still in Charlotte. "Floor 23 access revoked, pending board review." I took a screenshot and turned the screen toward Marcus. I was not even in the building when this was logged. How does that make sense? He shrugged. "You will have to take it up with the board." Diane was already walking toward the elevator bank. I followed her. "We need to talk about this now." She pressed the call button without looking at me. "You need to follow procedure. The hearing is scheduled for Saturday morning at 9 in the resident lounge. Submit your written response by Friday at 5, or the packet becomes final." The elevator doors opened. She stepped inside and hit a button. I moved forward, but she held up a hand. "Your access is suspended, remember?" The doors slid shut. I stood there in the empty lobby, my neon green hoodie suddenly feeling too bright under the recessed lighting, and tried to process what had just happened. I went back upstairs using the fire stairs, which still worked with my fob at the stairwell door. My unit was untouched. No sign of any contractor, no tools, no mess, nothing. I checked my calendar. The last person I had over was my brother, and that was 3 weeks ago. He had helped me move a couch. I texted him, "Did you sign in at the desk when you visited last month?" He replied within a minute, "Yeah, they scanned my ID and printed a visitor badge." Why? I told him what was happening. He sent back a string of question marks and then, "That is insane. Do you want me to send you a copy of the badge?" I said yes. I opened my laptop and logged into the building portal from the desktop site. The guest list section showed the same suspension banner, but the desktop version had a details link. I clicked it. The pop-up window showed a log entry. Guest list privileges suspended per board directive, effective immediately. Reason: unauthorized contractor access. No name. No date of the alleged incident. No unit number for the contractor. Just a blanket suspension. I clicked through to the violation history tab. It was empty. No prior warnings, no prior notices, nothing. This was the first entry on my account, and it had appeared 2 days ago while I was hundreds of miles away. I called my neighbor across the hall, an older woman named Janet who had lived in the building for a decade. She answered on the second ring. "Janet, this is your neighbor from 2312. Do you remember seeing any contractors going into my unit in the past 2 weeks?" She paused. "Honey, I have not seen anyone at your door in weeks. You have been gone, right?" "Yeah," I said. "I have been traveling for work." "Why?" I told her about the suspension and the hearing. She let out a long sigh. Diane is on one of her crusades again. She has been scheduling meetings when people cannot attend, and then pushing through decisions without a quorum. A bunch of residents are tired of selective enforcement. Last month, she tried to fine someone for having a planter on their balcony, but her own unit has 3. I felt a knot forming in my stomach. So this is retaliation? For what? I have never even been to a board meeting. Janet lowered her voice. "You filed a maintenance request last month for the rooftop terrace gate, right? The lock was broken and anyone could get in without a reservation." "Yeah," I said. It was a safety issue. Well, Diane did not like that. She told the property manager it made her look bad. She has been looking for a reason to come after you ever since. I thanked Janet and hung up. I pulled up the maintenance request in my email. It was dated 4 weeks ago. I had submitted it through the portal with photos of the broken lock at the rooftop terrace amenity entrance. The property manager had responded within 2 days, saying the lock would be replaced. Diane had replied to the thread 3 days later, asking why the request had not been routed through the board first. The property manager had explained that safety issues did not require board approval. Diane had not replied after that. I took a screenshot of the email thread and saved it to a folder. The next morning, I went down to the package room to pick up a delivery. The door was locked. I tapped my fob against the reader. Red light. Denied. I knocked. A voice called from inside. 1 second. The door opened a crack. The package room attendant, a woman named Kim, looked out at me. "Sorry, your access is suspended." "Board directive." "I can see my package on the shelf behind you," I said. Kim shook her head. "I cannot release it until your status is reinstated." "This is insane," I said. She gave me a sympathetic look. "I know, but I will get written up if I break protocol." I stepped back and pulled out my phone. I took a photo of the key fob denial screen and then a photo of the closed package room door. Kim watched me through the crack. "Are you going to fight this?" "Yeah," I said. "I am going to fight this." I spent the rest of Thursday digging through the portal. I found the meeting agendas for the past 6 months. and downloaded every PDF. The most recent agenda was dated 2 weeks ago. I opened it and scanned the line items. Nothing about contractor violations. Nothing about guest list suspensions. I opened the version history tab, something I had never noticed before. The agenda had been edited 3 times. The original version had been posted 4 weeks ago. The second version, posted 3 weeks ago, had added a line item about elevator maintenance. The third version, posted 6 days ago, had added a new section at the bottom, Resident Compliance Review. I clicked the comparison view. The new section included a single bullet point, Unauthorized Contractor Access, Unit 2312. I sat back in my chair. They had added my unit to the agenda after the fact, 6 days ago. 2 days before my access was suspended. 2 days after I had returned from my trip to Charlotte. The timeline did not make sense. If there had been an actual contractor violation, it would have been added to the agenda immediately. Instead, they had waited, edited the agenda in secret, and then ambushed me at the elevator bank the moment I came back. I took screenshots of all 3 agenda versions and saved them to the same folder as the rooftop email thread. Friday morning, I printed everything, the email thread, the 3 agenda versions with the comparison view highlighted, the screenshot of my empty violation history, the photo of the key fob denial screen at the package room. I organized them into a stack with color-printed timestamps highlighting the key dates. Then I sat down and wrote my response letter. I kept it short and factual. I had not authorized any contractor. I had been out of town during the time period in question. My violation history was empty. The agenda had been edited after the fact. I requested copies of the visitor logs, the access logs, and any witness statements. I submitted it through the portal at 4:58 on Friday afternoon, 2 minutes before the deadline. Diane replied within 10 minutes. Your response has been received. The hearing will proceed as scheduled. The board reserves the right to withhold internal documentation until the hearing. I read the message twice, then forwarded it to my personal email. I had something that would end it, but I was not ready to show my hand yet. I needed to wait for the right moment. Saturday morning, I arrived at the resident lounge check-in counter at 8:55. The lounge was on the 2nd floor, just off the elevator bank, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the street. Diane was already there, sitting at a folding table with 2 other board members I recognized from the lobby. One was a man in his 60s named Carl, the treasurer. The other was a woman in her 40s named Michelle, the secretary. Diane had her stack of color-printed timestamps in front of her. She looked up when I walked in. You are early. I set my own stack of documents on the counter. I like to be prepared. Diane called the hearing to order at 9 sharp. She read from a script. This hearing concerns Unit 2312 and allegations of unauthorized contractor access in violation of Building Rules Section 14.3. The resident has submitted a written response. The board has reviewed the response and finds it insufficient. We will now hear testimony from the reporting party. She nodded to Carl. He cleared his throat and opened a folder. On the evening of the 7th, I observed an individual in work clothes exiting the elevator on floor 23 carrying tools. I noted the unit number and reported it to the board president. I leaned forward. What time was this? Carl glanced at Diane. Approximately 7:30 in the evening. I pulled out my phone and opened my calendar. I was in Charlotte on the 7th. I have meeting records and hotel receipts. Carl frowned. The individual was observed. That is the testimony. Did you confirm it was my unit? I asked. Did you see them enter my door? Did you ask for identification? Carl hesitated. I observed the individual in the vicinity of your unit. Diane cut in. The testimony stands. You need to follow procedure. If you wish to dispute the observation, you may submit additional documentation within 10 business days. I shook my head. No. We are resolving this now. I pulled the top sheet from my stack and slid it across the table. This is the agenda version history. You added my unit to the compliance review section 6 days ago, 2 weeks after the alleged incident. If Carl reported this on the 7th, why was it not added to the agenda until 3 weeks later? Diane did not look at the paper. The agenda process is internal. It does not affect the validity of the testimony. I slid the second sheet across. This is my violation history. It is empty. No prior warnings, no prior notices. You suspended my access and my guest privileges based on a single unverified observation from a board member who admits he did not confirm the unit. Michelle, the secretary, picked up the sheet and read it. She looked at Diane. This does say the history is empty. Diane's jaw tightened. The violation is current. It would not appear in prior history. I slid the third sheet across. This is the email thread from my rooftop maintenance request. You questioned why it was not routed through the board. The property manager explained that safety issues do not require board approval. 3 days later, you stopped responding. 4 weeks later, my access is suspended. Carl leaned back in his chair. Are you suggesting retaliation? I am suggesting the timeline does not support the claim, I said. Diane stood up. The logs will not help you. We have testimony from a board member and a record of suspicious activity. Your access will remain suspended until you comply with the contractor registration process. What contractor? I said. I have not had a contractor in my unit in months. The last person I had over was my brother, and he signed in at the desk. I have a copy of his visitor badge if you need it. Diane opened her mouth, then closed it. She sat back down. The board will take this under advisement. The hearing is adjourned. She started gathering her papers. I stayed in my seat. No. We are not done. I pulled out the next sheet. This is the portal notification log. It shows when the suspension notice was created. It was generated at 4:12 in the afternoon on the 9th, while I was still in Charlotte. The alleged incident was on the 7th. Why did it take 2 days to create the notice, and why was it created remotely instead of being hand-delivered to the unit? Diane glanced at Carl. Administrative processing time. I shook my head. The portal auto-generates notices within 1 hour of a violation being logged. That is in the user agreement. A 2-day delay means the violation was logged manually, after the fact. Michelle picked up the sheet and read it. She looked at Diane. Is that true? Diane did not answer. I pulled out the fourth sheet. This is the elevator access log for my floor. It shows every time my fob was used on the 23rd floor for the past 30 days. The last entry before my trip was on the 5th. The next entry was on the 10th when I returned. There is no entry for the 7th, because I was not in the building. Carl frowned. The contractor could have used a master key or a guest fob. I slid the 5th sheet across. This is the guest fob log for Unit 2312. It is empty. I have not issued a guest fob in 6 months. If someone accessed my unit with a master key, that would be a building security issue, not a resident violation. Michelle set down her papers. I think we need to review the procedures here. Diane stood up again. This is not the time or place for procedural debates. The hearing is adjourned. The board will issue a decision within 10 business days. I stayed seated. I have one more document. Diane paused. I pulled out the final sheet, face down. Before I show this, I want to ask Carl a question. Did you actually see someone on my floor on the 7th? Or were you told to say that? Carl looked at Diane, then at me. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked down at his folder. "I saw someone," he said quietly, "but I did not see which unit they entered." Diane's face went pale. "That is enough," she said. Carl continued. "I reported it to Diane because she asked me to watch for violations on the upper floors. She said there had been complaints, but I did not confirm the unit. I just saw someone in the hallway." I flipped the final sheet over and slid it across the table. This is a board email thread from the 8th. Diane sent an email to Carl and Michelle with the subject line "Compliance Review Strategy." In the email, she writes, "We need to establish a pattern of non-compliance on 23 to justify stricter oversight. Carl reported activity on the 7th. We can use that as a basis for suspension and force a private meeting to address ongoing concerns." Michelle, you replied with a question about whether we have enough evidence. Diane replied, "The logs will not help him. We control the access." Michelle picked up the sheet and read it. Her face went red. She looked at Diane. "You wrote this?" Diane did not answer. Carl took the sheet and read it. He set it down slowly. "This was never about a contractor," he said. "This was about the maintenance request." Michelle stood up. "I did not agree to this. I asked a question in that email, and you told me it was standard procedure." Carl nodded. "I reported what I saw because I thought it was legitimate. I did not know you were planning to fabricate a violation." Diane grabbed her stack of documents. "This hearing is over. I am filing a motion to dismiss based on procedural errors." Michelle shook her head. "No, I am filing a motion to dismiss based on this email. This is retaliation, and it is documented." Carl agreed. "I will second that motion." Diane looked between them, her coral blazer suddenly seeming too bright under the lounge lights. She turned and walked out. The door swung shut behind her. Michelle sat back down. "I am sorry," she said. "I did not know she was doing this." "I appreciate that," I said. Carl rubbed his face. "I will submit a report to the property manager today. Your access should be reinstated by this afternoon." Michelle nodded. "I will make sure the suspension is removed from your record and the notice is expunged. I will also be recommending that Diane step down from the board." Carl agreed. "This is not the first time she has overstepped, but it is the most egregious." I gathered my papers. "Thank you." They both nodded. I walked out of the lounge and took the elevator back to my floor. The reader flashed green. Access granted. By Saturday afternoon, my access was fully reinstated. I checked the portal. The suspension notice was gone. The violation history was still empty. My guest list privileges were restored. The package room access was back. I went downstairs and picked up my delivery. Kim smiled when she saw me. "I heard what happened. Good for you." I thanked her and went back upstairs. That evening, I got an email from the property manager. It was addressed to all residents. The message explained that the board had conducted a compliance review hearing that morning and had determined that the allegations were unfounded. The suspension had been lifted. The resident ledger had been corrected. The board was reviewing internal procedures to ensure future compliance with governing documents. The email did not mention Diane by name, but everyone knew. Monday morning, I got a call from Janet. "Have you seen the lobby?" I went downstairs. There was a notice posted on the bulletin board next to the concierge desk. It announced that Diane Mercer had resigned from the board effective immediately. The board would hold a special election to fill the vacant president position within 30 days. Residents were encouraged to attend the next meeting to nominate candidates. Janet was standing by the elevators, reading the notice. She looked at me and grinned. "You did it." I shrugged. I just showed them the emails. She shook her head. You stood up. Half the building has been complaining about her for 2 years, but nobody wanted to fight. You fought, and you won. Over the next week, I heard from a dozen residents. Some sent emails through the portal. Some stopped me in the lobby. A couple knocked on my door. They all said the same thing. Thank you. Diane had been targeting people for months, using selective enforcement and procedural tricks to push through personal agendas. My case was the most blatant, but it was not the first. One resident had been fined for parking in a guest spot overnight when his assigned spot was blocked by maintenance equipment. Another had been cited for having a delivery box in the hallway for 10 minutes. A third had been threatened with a lien for questioning a special assessment. Everyone had been too afraid to push back because Diane controlled the access logs, the hearing schedules, and the vendor contracts. But once Michelle and Carl saw the email thread, they realized how far she had gone. The board voted unanimously to adopt new transparency rules, including public access to meeting agendas, version histories, and violation logs. They also implemented a new hearing process that required witness statements to be submitted in writing and reviewed by an independent third party before any sanctions could be applied. The special election was held 3 weeks later. Michelle ran for president and won. Carl stayed on as treasurer. A new resident, a lawyer named David who lived on the 15th floor, joined as vice president. At the first meeting under the new board, Michelle announced that all prior compliance cases would be reviewed for procedural irregularities. Any case that involved unverified testimony or missing documentation would be expunged. She also announced that the board was implementing a new conflict of interest policy. Board members could not initiate or vote on cases involving units on their own floor or cases related to maintenance requests they had opposed. The residents applauded. I sat in the back and watched. It felt like the building had exhaled for the first time in years. A month later, I was walking through the lobby when I saw Diane. She was coming out of the mailroom carrying a small box. She saw me and froze. For a second, I thought she was going to say something. Then she turned and walked toward the elevator bank. I watched her tap her fob against the reader. Green light. Access granted. She stepped into the elevator and the doors closed. I went to the concierge desk. Marcus was working. He looked up and grinned. I heard you took down the dragon. I laughed. I just showed up with receipts. He shook his head. Man, half the building wanted to do what you did. You were the only one with the guts. I appreciated that. But honestly, I was just tired of the games. He nodded. Well, it worked. The new board is night and day. I have not had to deal with a single bogus complaint in a month. I went up to the rooftop terrace that evening. The lock had been replaced, just like the property manager had promised. I tapped my fob and the gate clicked open. The terrace was empty. I walked to the edge and looked out over the city. The sun was setting, painting the skyline in shades of orange and pink. I pulled out my phone and checked the portal. My ledger was clean. My access was unrestricted. My violation history was empty. Everything was back to normal. Better than normal, actually. The building felt different now, lighter, like a weight had been lifted. 2 months after the hearing, I got an email from Michelle. She wanted to know if I would be interested in joining the communications committee. The committee was responsible for updating the building website, managing the resident portal, and drafting the monthly newsletter. I thought about it for a day, then said yes. It seemed like a good way to make sure the new transparency rules actually stuck. The committee met once a month in the resident lounge. There were 5 of us: Michelle, David, Janet, a younger resident named Sophia who worked in tech, and me. We spent the first meeting going through the old newsletters and identifying gaps. There were months where no newsletter had been sent at all. Other months where the newsletter was just a list of rules with no context. We decided to redesign the format. Each newsletter would include a summary of board decisions, a financial update, upcoming maintenance schedules, and a resident spotlight. Sophia volunteered to build a new template. I volunteered to write the summaries. The first newsletter under the new format went out in early December. The response was overwhelming. Residents who had never engaged with the board before started showing up to meetings. People asked questions. They submitted suggestions. They voted on amendments to the governing documents. The building started to feel like a community instead of a collection of isolated units. Michelle told me later that the newsletter had been the tipping point. Once people saw that the board was actually listening, they started to trust the process again. If you are enjoying this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more HOA drama. In January, the board held a town hall to discuss a proposed special assessment for elevator modernization. The elevators were original to the building and starting to show their age. The assessment would cost each unit about $3,000, spread over 2 years. Diane had tried to push through a similar assessment the year before, but she had done it without any resident input and had inflated the cost to include cosmetic upgrades that nobody wanted. The proposal had failed. This time, Michelle invited 3 elevator contractors to present bids at the town hall. Each contractor explained what needed to be done, what the timeline would look like, and what the cost breakdown was. Residents asked questions. The board took notes. At the end of the meeting, the board put it to a vote. The assessment passed with 80% approval. It was the first special assessment in the building's history to pass on the first try. In February, I ran into Carl in the parking garage. He was loading groceries into his car. He waved when he saw me. "I have been meaning to thank you," he said. "For what?" I asked. "For holding me accountable," he said. "I should have confirmed the unit before I reported anything." I let Diane pressure me into cutting corners, and that was wrong. "I appreciate that," I said. He nodded. "The new board is a lot better. I actually enjoy the meetings now." I laughed. "That is a low bar." He grinned. "True, but it is a start." That spring, the building hit a new milestone. For the first time in 5 years, every unit was current on their fees. There were no outstanding violations, no pending hearings, no disputes. The property manager sent an email congratulating the board and the residents. Michelle framed it and hung it in the resident lounge. It was a small thing, but it felt significant. It meant that people trusted the process again. They believed that the rules were being applied fairly and that the board was working for the community, not against it. In April, I got an email from Diane. It was short. She apologized for what had happened and said she had let her frustration with the building cloud her judgment. She did not make excuses. She did not ask for anything. She just said she was sorry. I read it twice, then replied. I told her I appreciated the apology and that I hoped she was doing well. I meant it. Holding a grudge would not change what had happened, and she had already faced the consequences. Moving on seemed like the healthier option for everyone. By summer, the building had settled into a new rhythm. The board meetings were well attended and productive. The newsletters went out on time. The maintenance requests were handled promptly. The elevator modernization project was on schedule and under budget. Residents started organizing social events again. Movie nights in the lounge, weekend brunches on the rooftop terrace, holiday parties in the lobby. The building felt alive in a way it had not before. People smiled in the hallways. They held doors for each other. They knew each other's names. I stayed on the communications committee for another year, then stepped down to focus on work. By that point, the new systems were running smoothly, and there were plenty of residents willing to step up. Sophia took over as committee chair. She did a great job. The newsletters got even better. The portal became more user-friendly. The board continued to operate transparently and collaboratively. It was exactly what the building needed. Looking back, the whole experience taught me a few things. First, documentation is everything. If I had not saved those emails, those agenda versions, those portal logs, I would not have had a case. Second, procedural fairness matters. When people trust that the rules are being applied consistently, they are willing to engage. When they do not, they disengage, and resentment builds. Third, standing up is hard, but it is worth it. Half the building had been dealing with Diane's tactics for years, but nobody wanted to be the first to push back. Once someone did, it created space for others to speak up. The culture changed because one person decided the status quo was not acceptable. I still live at Aurora Heights. My unit overlooks the city, and on clear nights I can see all the way to the mountains. The building is not perfect, but it is home. The board is functional. The rules are clear. The community is engaged. That is all I ever wanted. A place where I could live without constant drama threatening my ability to focus on my job and my life. A place where the systems worked the way they were supposed to. A place where accountability meant something. The rooftop terrace lock still works. I go up there sometimes in the evenings when the city lights start to come on and the air cools down. I think about that Saturday morning in the resident lounge when I slid that final email across the table and watched Diane's face go pale. I think about Carl admitting he had not confirmed the unit. I think about Michelle standing up and saying she would not be part of a retaliation scheme. I think about how close I came to just accepting the suspension and moving on, because fighting seemed too hard and too risky. I am glad I did not. I am glad I printed those documents, organized them into a stack with color-printed timestamps and highlights, and showed up to that hearing ready to fight. The case was dismissed that same day. My ledger was corrected within hours. Diane resigned within a week. The board implemented new transparency rules within a month. The building culture shifted within a season. None of it would have happened if I had walked away from that elevator bank and accepted the suspension. None of it would have happened if I had not kept receipts, asked questions, and demanded accountability. The system only works when people hold it accountable. When they do not, people like Diane fill the vacuum and turn governance into a personal weapon. I learned that the hard way, but I also learned that fighting back is possible, even when the odds seem stacked against you. You just need evidence, patience, and the willingness to stand your ground when it matters. The rest takes care of itself. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.